What's up, guys? You're tuning into Jimmy in the Basement, where Jimmy, myself, plays World of Warcraft. We're going to be discussing some changes coming into Midnight Season 2, patch 12.1, the Curse of Ula'tek. A lot of changes are coming on how Blizzard is going to distribute endgame gear, and there's going to be some determining factors. So the Nebulous Void Cores, as we got them this season in Midnight, this is the bonus roll currency that we have. That we get 2 guaranteed per week from Decimus, and then we can get a third that's uncapped if we decide to throw our Great Vault for it, provided we filled our Great Vault that week enough to get the 6 Thalassian tokens of merit to be able to get the bonus roll. So as of right now, Mythic Plus requires 1 bonus roll per dungeon for a total of 2, but raid bosses require 2 Nebulous Void Cores. Next season, the raid is only going to require 1. So if you're Mythic raiding, or at least like high-end AOTC heroic, you're probably going to save your bonus rolls for those bosses. Or for raid bosses, period. Especially if a best-in-slot item is behind it. So we're going to be getting the Void Cores off rip instead of waiting till week 8. And there is going to be another vendor after 8 weeks of Season 2 that's going to provide us another Void Core. So after week 8, we should have 3 bonus roll tokens every subsequent week after week 8. But we're going to start the season out with having an option to throw our Great Vault and go run a dungeon on a plus 10 or higher to go try to get that item that we want on MythTrack. But, as we said, Blizzard detected fun and determined right here that we geared too quickly in Midnight Season 1, so they're going to be slowing down the gear process in Season 2. A little bit unfortunate because I think that gearing should be quick, where, well, to a degree, because we're still limited to the crest cap of 100 of a level of crest per week, and typically a crafted item eats up 75 to 8. Like right now, if you were to craft a 285 Radiance crafted item, assuming that we had the crest cap still, you get 100 myth crests per week. You'd have to spend 80 of those to craft a 285 item. So, or to upgrade a 280, or to upgrade a lower crafted item like a 272 heroic to a 285 mythic. So you'd have to spend 80% of your crests that you got that week on a crafted item. Gear to me is the most disposable item in progression, because none of the gear that we have right now, even if we're fully mythed out 289 to 298 gear, it's obsolete when the next raid tier comes out. So, and all the gear that we're going to get in Season 2 is going to be obsolete when Season 3 comes out, and then when the next expansion comes out, all the gear is, replaceable. So, gear to me is very replaceable. I don't know why Blizzard would be so worried about players gearing up quickly when you're still limited to the crest cap. So, even if you got a couple of mythic pieces earlier on in the season, you're capped by how much you can upgrade that item. And if it's not a major item, like a weapon or a trinket, it's probably not going to be that much power early on. Because, as we know how they do the crafting system, is that once we have enough currency to craft, we typically craft a weapon because it's a high budget, high DPS item early on in the season. So I don't really understand why Blizzard would be worried about gearing too quickly, even though that we're still limited to the crest reward. Assuming that they lift the crest cap after 1,000 crests, which would be after 10 weeks. I mean, okay, so whatever. So Blizzard's going to slow down how fast we gear. Cool. So, heading into Season 2, yeah, the Void Cores are going to be available, right off the rip. So that's that. So that's. But the value of the raid rewards is really what I wanted to talk about here. So it says to better reflect the time and effort required to defeat raid bosses and align with the reward value proposition of Mythic Plus, we are making several significant changes. Great Vault rewards for raiding now will behave in the following ways. So essentially, you're going to, if you complete a raid on a difficulty, you're going to get a 1 of 6 item on the higher difficulty. So if your group or you decide to get into AOTC and you defeat enough bosses in Heroic, you're going to be able to get a 1 of 6 myth track item from Vault. So now you're incentivizing players to do lower difficulty. And all you have to do is Heroic Raid to get mythic items. You don't even have to step foot in Mythic Raid. Also, Mythic Raid rewards are going to be 6 of 6. So they're going to be fully upgraded when you get them out of your vault. So meaning that you don't have to spend any crest on that item, which is really nice early on for the guilds that push Mythic really early. But the changes that they're making though is that the penultimate and final bosses are going to have a 9-track item behind it, which is ultimately going to have an item level discrepancy between Mythic Raiders and Mythic Plus players. So by gear alone, Blizzard is trying to incentivize players to step foot in Mythic Raid. Which, the reason I don't necessarily like this is because that Mythic Raid is extremely time consuming, and aside from the lockout and the amount of players that are required to raid, even if, let's just say that Blizzard has decided to put the Ula'tek raid as a flex raid, where you could do it with a minimum of 15 players, but you could have up to 25 players. It doesn't require the concrete 20, which is nicer for smaller raid teams, like smaller guilds that don't always have exactly 20 players to raid. Or maybe they pick up a couple of players and they have like 22 or 23. Guess what? Your entire team, your entire guild can raid. So there's going to be some cantrip items from the final 2 bosses that are going to be rare drops that are going to have a higher item level than any other item in the game. Means that they're going to be best in slot. The issue with that is not the item itself, but the accessibility of the item. So where the way that this has to work is that if you can AOTC every week, but you can roll on that item potentially from your vault, and it can eventually be upgraded to the 9 of 6 myth track, then there's no incentive to Mythic Raid, and all you have to do is clear Heroic Raid every week, which we all know Heroic is far more respected of a player's time in-game compared to Mythic, especially on these penultimate and final bosses. We'll take the last 2 bosses of this raid tier, which is Bellerin and Lura. These are bosses that take easily, especially Lura, hundreds of pulls to maybe kill. Okay? Where, a boss that takes 300 to 500 pulls to me is insane. Where that is not a respect of players' time. That's weeks of progression, and this late in the season, trying to prog Lura, if you're not making significant headway or drastically increasing the amount of time that you are in the raid, you're probably not going to get cutting edge for that raid tier. But locking these really good items or best items behind these bosses, assuming that they're not available from the Heroic Great Vault, or there's not going to be anything competitive from Mythic Plus, but you're also not going to at least fix the lockout. Where, remember, if you only kill the first 2 bosses on Mythic, You can't go pug yourself or go find a team that's progging on a higher boss to try to kill it to get a loot from that item from that boss, or you want to bonus roll an item from that boss because you're holding on to a bonus roll. You miss out on the rest of raiding for that week unless that team that you got the lockout with is going to continue to raid. So removing the lockout, at least after Race to World First, is what I push for, to where Mythic Lockout should work like the rest of the difficulties. This would be one of the biggest accessibility factors on from Heroic to Mythic Raid, or Mythic Raid compared to any other piece of content. Where Mythic Plus, you can endlessly grind. Granted, you can't spend unlimited amount of bonus rolls, but you can endlessly grind a dungeon and get really good at the dungeon and have an easier time with that dungeon on whatever key level you're trying to run, and it puts you in a better position for if you decide you want to push this season and get into the higher key levels and maybe go for 1% or even 0.1%. Getting the fundamentals of the routes and the mechanics and everything and your interrupts and stuff down is nice. But solely locking these items, especially these rare cantrip items behind raid, cool, but these items should not be significantly ahead of everything else. We'll take this season, for example. The Gaze of the Allseer trinket. That was literally best in slot for everybody in the game. Tanks, healers, and DPS. Where there was no other trinket at its respective track level that would even come close to replacing it. But they at least put it behind a boss that was reasonable, that you can actually kill in a pug. You can pug Chimeras, the Undreamt God, in Dreamwreck. You can pug that boss. Are there pugs that are just 20 people running around with their head like a chicken with their heads cut off? Absolutely. But there are some groups that are actually coordinated, that these are people who actually know how to do this boss, and you kill it in a couple of pulls. So having a trinket like Gaze behind not the easiest boss in the world, I would put Chimeras as a slightly more difficult, other than like Imperator or Voracious. But you put an item behind a boss that was reasonable to kill, that you could reliably bonus roll on, and there was no other trinket in the game for its respective passive slot that even came close to replacing it. And where, I'll take my example, I main an Enhancement Shaman. The next best trinket, or the two next best trinkets to Allseer, this also depends on your sim and your stat weights, was the Solar Flare Prism from Skyreach and the Heart of Wind from Windrunner Spire. Where Enhancement Shaman likes haste, so if you're lacking a little bit of haste, Heart of Wind might sim better for you because it has a passive haste proc. For me, mine was Solar Flare Prism. I had a lot of haste. Solar Flare Prism was better for my gear loadout because it wanted the critical strike bonus from that trinket. A Mythic 298. This is full power with the Ascendant Void Forge. A Solar Flare Prism at 298 was still, for my Enhancement Shaman, almost 2% less DPS than a 289 Allseer. Not even a fully upgraded Ascendant Void Forged Allseer. Mind you, Allseer went through several nerfing processes. I can't imagine how much that trinket was, early on. I'm sure it was insane. But I remember, I'm pretty sure, even a heroic. Yeah, that's what it was. When I had a Mythic Solar Flare Prism on my Enhancement Shaman, this is before the Ascendant Void Forge came out, a 276 heroic Allseer was like 1.5% more DPS than my mythic Solar Flare Prism. So there's just some items from Raid that just like Mythic Plus items don't even compete with. Even if they have the same item level. So, power level, yes, but item level. Where later in the season, when you are just like legitimately several item levels behind players, you're probably at least 2 to 3 item levels behind, high-end, cutting-edge mythic raiders who have access to these penultimate and final boss 9 of 6 items. They're going to be much higher priority to be taken in keys, especially as you climb in keys, where every damage and survivability advantage comes into play. They're going to take that person over the Mythic Plus player. Now, if they decided to wear that 9 of 6 upgraded item is essentially squished down to 6 of 6 in Mythic Plus, and it gets its full power only in Raid, I'm totally okay with that. To where when you apply for a group and you guys are the same item level, then now you're just being picked solely on your IO score and or does your spec fit the group comp better. I would rather have competitiveness to that level other than being, objectively a lower item level than anybody else because either I don't mythic raid or I don't mythic raid to a high-end / cutting-edge level. Where, I don't know, maybe it's me, but like I thought that there was enough motivation for mythic raiding with the mount, the mount that's guaranteed to drop when the season's current, and the cutting edge achievement that's always on your account. You can always advertise yourself that you're a cutting edge raider. So the achievement and the mount is forever, but the gear is replaceable. Because when Season 3 comes out, or let's say they do 2 seasons of Midnight, which I don't think so. I think they're going to do 3 seasons. But let's say the last Titan was to come out after this season, the gear doesn't matter anymore. So the gear is just completely disposable. So I would much rather see these items either be full power in Mythic Raid or be a little bit more accessible for people who don't Mythic Raid. Or at least do high-end Mythic Plus. To where the loot table for Mythic Plus is still competitive to Raid. That's just my opinion. So, going to the next thing. So, Catalyst charges, of course, are staying. That's essentially the modern-day Reforged system. So, let's see what it says. Since the Catalyst introduction, the value of armor, item drops, and class set slots have been greatly reduced because the vast majority will simply be converted into a class set item. In order to give these items their own identity and allow further character customization, class set armor will now inherit the secondary stats of the original converted item. This will allow to apply to certain special effects going forward, such as Ula'tek's Venom Cursed Armor cantrip. As in previous seasons, players may still acquire class armor directly from the raid. Okay, so basically what you're doing is, if you get an item that's an off-tier item, but it objectively has better stats for your spec, you're going to still be able to catalyze the item. Like, let's say it is a, part of your 4 set. You're going to be able to retain the cantrip effect on that item as well as the desired stats. So, for example, if you're a haste mastery class, like a Devourer, Demon Hunter, or an Enhancement Shaman, but you get an item that's crit verse, which is objectively lower priority stats for the most part, depending on what your sim says and whatnot, which will matter later in the season. You'll be able to keep those stats with that item instead of it re-rolling to whatever the tier set stats are. That's cool if you are like hard pushing for certain stats, or just, that those specific secondary stats are objectively simming better for you, then it makes sense. I think with Season 2, with the power creep that we're getting, we're probably going to hit diminishing returns to where if you're a haste mastery class, there's going to be a point where haste and mastery are going to start hitting DR, and then you're going to start having to invest in a crit and or verse, depending on what your stat priorities are. So if there's items that have those lower stats that are just simming higher for you, you're going to be able to take them. But having some cantrip armor is pretty cool, I guess. But you're still going to be able to have the tier set. So I don't think the 4-set tier is going away. In terms of, like, you're always going to have that one off-tier piece that's just objectively better, and then you're going to have the other 4-set to get your bonuses. So instead of the Ascendant Void Cores, they're going to do Ascendant Venom Stones to make the Venom Cores. So this is essentially just like what they have in Season 1 right now, and they're putting it in Season 2. So, okay. With the Ascendant Venom Stones are not quite as impressive as what Decimus did with the Ascendant Void Cores. Discover the Trick Zone. In addition to weapons and trinkets, players will also be able to upgrade their necks to a maximum item level to a Mythic 8 item. As in Season 1, only fully upgraded hero, myth, and max quality crafted gear of the equivalent item level may be upgraded with Venom Stones. Okay, so basically what they're doing is, in Season 1, you can only upgrade your weapons and trinkets. Whether they have to be fully upgraded hero, they have to be max radiant crafted, or fully upgraded myth track for the Void Forge to work. So all they're doing is they're making to where necklaces have that effect as well. But instead of Void Cores, we're doing Venom Stones. So you'll acquire it the same way, which is the plus 10 keys or higher, the tier 11 Bountiful Delves, Nightmare Prey, and it will require 10 Ascendant Venom Stones to upgrade each equipment, where right now it takes 5. So you're either going to have to run 10 dungeons a week at plus 10 or higher to upgrade that one piece, or in combination to your Bountiful Delves and or Nightmare Prey per week. I prefer the 5 because that was just like respected of time. But this is just going to keep you in the game more to get more power creep. So that is the changes coming to endgame gear in World of Warcraft Midnight Season 2, the Curse of Ula'tek. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. What do you guys think about this gearing system? Do you guys like it? Do you not like it? Granted, I don't know if this is going to be the final iteration of how they're going to be doing the gearing system, considering we're about 7 weeks out from the drop of Season 2. Season 2 is speculated around August 11th of 2026. But yeah, just let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you like this video and want to see me cover more WoW news, content, gameplay, any kind of spec class changes, hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.